Welcome to TMG Tonight. Our guest this evening is Adam Stites, who describes himself as a serial entrepreneur. He founded an e-commerce retailer called iStores and grew its revenue from zero to just under $10 million before selling. Adam and his wife Katie have been investing in real estate in Washington and Oregon over the past 20 years and have now taken their investment venture south to Tucson, Arizona. Adam is going to share his experiences on how and why he started investing in real estate and his thoughts on portfolio diversification by both property type and geographic location. Please join me in welcoming Adam Stites.
Hi, Carmen.
So I hear you've been traveling during the COVID thing. How'd that go?
Well, it's always interesting, mask on, mask off, and hand sanitize everything in your tables. But it's, I think at the end of this, we're going to just have hand sanitizer built into us. Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. So you traveled did you fly or you drove?
Not to Tucson. So we've gone a couple of times to Tucson and then looking at other properties. So we have my wife and I have a small single engine airplane, so it allows us to kind of shoot over.
Oh, you're a pilot.
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
I've forgotten that.
And so taking a look at some smaller markets, being able to jump on deals when they come up, and yeah.
Right. Well, actually, if it's the plane and you and Katie, right, that's pretty safe.
It's the ultimate social distancing. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about, you have an interesting story. Let's talk about how you got into investing in real estate.
Sure. So as you mentioned before, I had an e-commerce business, and my first landlord at the time was an older gentleman, and I would hassle him occasionally like, hey, you need to sell me the building I'm operating in. And he'd joke and he'd say, no, I'm not going to do that, kid, and get out of here. And eventually I found a building that was for sale about a mile or two away. And I said, I'm looking at it, but it's in bad shape. And he sat me down. He said, listen, the thing about real estate is that it's going to double its value every 5 years if you play it right. And explained to me the economics and basically took me to the side and said, this would be a good move for you to start thinking about diversifying outside of just an operating business. And I listened to him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long ago was that?
Oh, wow. This is the first industrial building I bought for our e-commerce company was back in 2001.
Oh, so
yeah.
That's quite a while ago.
Yeah.
So how is that changed from then to now? Like, financing is different and, rents are different and, of course we have the COVID, but
sure.
How has some of that changed now that you're looking for other investments compared to how it was years ago?
Sure. So in some ways it's, as we all know, a wild ride. In some ways the fundamentals are still there, right? That you've got a property, you've got rents, you've got a bank that you have to deal with. So I'd say that those elements are still the same. We've certainly seen a changing environment right now in terms of rents and multifamily rent collection, expectations of value with interest rates decreasing, what's happening in the cap rates despite the macroeconomic picture. But I think fundamentally it's still the same. You've got to attract a high quality tenant at a good price and deliver a good product.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and you recently sold Cedar Village townhomes here in Vancouver.
We did with your help and excellent management over the years. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I know that was a fairly long transaction, if I recall, because that was an older property. Right.
And in the middle of COVID, just well as COVID was starting.
Right. And so, that due diligence process sometimes on those properties can be a little tricky. Right?
Sure.
Do you want to share with us what you potentially learned from that, since it was a little bit longer transaction?
Sure. So when we first listed the property for sale, we were not under duress to sell it. So if it sold at our price, we were happy to take it, and if we kept it as a performing asset, that would be just fine. Alternatively, we're looking at the potential of maybe refinancing the property to pull out some cash and then kind of proceed from there. As the transaction progressed, our buyer, owing, I think, to the bank's concern and everybody's question what's going to happen, as I think we're still asking now, but if you rewind back to March, April, May, the what's going to happen was, the outcomes were much broader than what we're looking at right now.
Right. There was even more uncertainty back. Sure. Absolutely.
So, I think that kind of slowed the transaction. Everyone was, particularly the bank, was being cautious.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you seen that with lenders, recently carrying forward that they're a little more, maybe just wanting more documentation, a little tighter on perhaps some requirements? Have you seen any changes in that?
Yeah, I call that the rent roll every 5 minutes syndrome.
Yes.
So
Yes, that's true.
I'm sure you guys are getting that. But yeah, so we sold that property as Cedar Village, and then we 1031 down to 2 properties, a 20 unit, and then a 75 unit down in Tucson. And what we ended up doing in order to be compliant with our 1031 guidelines is we bought the first 20 unit all cash. We recently just closed a refinance on that, or I should say an initial financing of that property that we paid all cash. And then the second transaction, we actually went down the road with a lender for Freddie Mac.
Oh,
and
good.
Initially, the terms were phenomenal, loan to value very strong, but the process required to meet all of the government's documents were outrageous. And then we found out approximately 40 days before scheduled closing date, after going through 2 sets of different approvals, that they were going to pull back on the commitment to lend.
Oh,
So literally leaving us at the altar as after passing multiple underwritings, and we think this coincided roughly with the federal eviction moratorium. So my read has been talking to other banks we've used in the past. A bank is going to have a given appetite for a given asset class at a given moment, and it's kind of like the weather in Chicago. If you don't like it, wait 5 minutes,
Right.
and eventually, so they'll come back and say, okay, well, we're now back into multifamily. So, my experience has been talk to a lot of banks, understand what the underwriting criteria is, the underwriting timeline, how they're going to look at the deal, and have a backup. Right. Particularly now, things are more are less certain than maybe they've been in the past.
So how did you end up in Tucson? What did you look at lots of different areas? How
Sure.
did you end up there, and how did you actually choose those particular properties?
Sure. Yeah. So we have 3 criteria that we use when we're looking at for multifamily. First and foremost, we stay in multifamily. We stay in our niche. There's enough complexity and domain knowledge within that category that we're not going to look for industrial or retail. So we look for metro areas greater than 1 million people. The ability to buy at a 30% discount to replacement cost. We feel that if our cost basis in the building is less than folks that are new coming on the market, we'll have a sustainable economic advantage. And finally, we target for between 20 to 25% IRR, measured at between 5 to 7 years, and that's with pretty conservative underwriting standards.
Right,
Yep.
right. And so you must obviously though looked at other areas for that, or how did you come across something in Tucson? Did you know somebody down there, or?
So it met the criteria that we mentioned in terms of metro area. We also look at employment growth faster than the national average. So with those 2 metrics, we kind of define, okay, these are the cities that we can go look
Right.
at. I'm a member of EO, or Entrepreneurs Organization, so I use that network to connect me with a gentleman who owns a brokerage down in Phoenix. As Phoenix and Tucson were 2 markets we're looking at, connected me with our broker, who she's been absolutely amazing. And we started going out and taking a look at what was available in the market.
So how many cities met your criteria?
Oh, we had quite a few. We liked Vancouver as we exited the property here. We looked at Boise, Tucson, Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Spokane. Made an offer on 2 properties in Spokane.
I've heard Spokane is hot.
Yep, exactly.
And Boise too, actually.
It is, and the question of being too hot, you don't want to find that there's a lot of dollars out there chasing deals.
There are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, when you're working through a transaction, so let's say you've made an offer, it's been accepted, you're starting down that due diligence pipeline or timeline. And so what's some of the due diligence that are hot on your list? I mean, usually, I've seen due diligence lists that had 100 points on it, and I've seen ones that had 20. So where do you fall in that, and what's your hot buttons when you're looking at due diligence?
Sure. So the way that I'm looking at diligence, putting aside for a second the physical condition of the property, which would kind of tie into your CapEx budget, but is simply validating the inputs that we made in the economic model. So let's start at the top of the P&L. Let's talk about rents. Why are our assumptions there? Is the property collected this rent? What are the comparables in the neighborhood? Is there a PIP or a property improvement plan that we're going to roll out, which ties in the CapEx? Where is that going to place us in terms of rents once we roll out the PIP? What vacancy is realistic? Again, we don't want to make up numbers that make the number at the end feel good. It's very simple to do that. We keep our base financial model and a lot of the assumptions static. So the only variables are going to be our income assumptions in the base of expenses that we've used. So then moving on to the expense category, we're doing basic stuff. Let's look at the utility bills for the last 24 months. Let's take a look at the garbage bill. Who's doing the landscaping? What's the water consumption? Is there RUBS in place? Should there be RUBS in place? Can we offer amenities to the tenants? That high-speed shared Wi-Fi is now becoming a really nice amenity to bring in tenants. We ask ourselves the broader question: hey, if you upgrade this property, and I'm wholeheartedly a believer in upgrading property. Yes, you get a rent increase, but the biggest increase, and maybe you've seen this as well, Carmen, is by having a higher quality product, you get a higher quality tenant who doesn't turn. So you're, other than my utilities, my turns are my highest expenses. You don't have to pay to go acquire that customer again. So create a great product, higher quality product. People want to stay. To me, that's how you boost NOI, is having happy customers. So to answer your question, fundamentally for us, due diligence is just GL account by GL account, looking at the income, looking at the vacancies, looking at all those expenses and saying, okay, are these realistic? Do we think we can do better? If so, let's go into really detail and confirm those estimates. And so that's really the base of it. And then, of course, the mechanical condition is more, okay, hey, we've got to have a building that's safe, and we've got to plan for a roof, and the standard sort of replacement reserves. Yeah.
So do you do your own due diligence, or do you contract with a third party? How do you do it?
Katie and I do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're big believers in probably the nerdy pilot type, but we've got checklists for all of this. We use Asana for managing internally the deal flow in terms of property we're looking at, property we made offers on, properties in escrow, tracking all the 1031 considerations. Yeah.
So let's talk about renovations, because obviously if you're talking about upgrading, you must be doing some kind of renovations on the property.
Yes. So in the example of the two properties down in Phoenix, we're looking at things as basic as potholes. It looks like it was bombed during World War II, where the tenants have to park, which is terrible. So we're going to pave that. We're going to paint. We're looking at adding a high-speed wireless network, basically included with the RUBS program at the property. It's just general enhancements that make people want to stay longer.
Right.
Yep.
So for those, for instance, you didn't actually do any interior renovations, like I don't know, all new appliances. That's typically the standard. All new appliances, countertops.
Sure. Yeah.
Did you?
So that's a great question. So on both of these properties, we've taken the approach of you acquire the property, you immediately do external improvements, and then internal renovations as units come vacant. It's the best for cash flows. What would be required financially in order to putting aside the fact that it's not a nice thing to do, and then you've got to go find new tenants to replace all the folks that you pushed out. The numbers are a lot better. We have a turn, and then at that point, this is some of my old e-commerce stuff. We're doing A/B testing, is saying, okay, let's renovate. So everybody gets really excited about and I think you gave me a hard time about this at one point. Everything is going to be stainless steel. Everything you said, Adam. Maybe the neighborhood doesn't justify it, and I appreciated that, and I think you saved my bacon there. But if we do want to test anything from just an economy, so let's keep the price point good for folks, to a midline up to that stainless steel everything and the granite countertops, let's put it out and create 2 or 3 units and then get market feedback and have that kind of serve to correct the plan going forward. Yeah.
And that is so, that is so important. Renovations are expensive no matter how you look at it, because especially once you get in there and start, then it's hard to know when to stop too, because people say, oh, we're just going to put new appliances in. Well, then they put the new appliances in. They go, oh, well, the countertops looks horrible. Okay, well, let's do the countertops. The cabinets don't look so good. Let's refinish those. And so it's kind of a perpetual thing. And so I think to the discussion that we had quite a few months ago about that, people really do need to look at what the market will bear, and putting granite countertops or stainless steel appliances or doing something so costly, and when you actually do your returns, you don't get the yield or the return that you would need in order to support that either.
Sure. So, yeah. And it almost reminds me of IKEA's approach. Does it build the price first?
Oh, yeah.
And so, you've got folks in a given area and a price point who this is what they want to spend. So deliver the product that folks want to buy.
Right, right. And so now that you are, now that you have your properties down there, and I think you said you still own some things in Salem. Did you say you had industrial? Did you say you had an industrial warehouse, or you sold that one?
So we had a 38,000 square foot, an adaptive reuse in downtown Vancouver. So we moved that from manufacturing to indoor recreation and warehouse and office. We sold that. We had a couple of single family homes in Salem, so 3 houses there, sold that, and then also had an additional rental home in Vancouver. So all out of Oregon and Washington at this point. Not to say, I might not come back, but kind of consolidating from single individual properties into, now we'll have combined, once we split another unit, 96 units, all within 2 miles of each other. So from a management perspective, and kind of getting efficiency in CapEx and renovation budgets, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, good. Yeah. On that note, we are going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Here at AMS, we've been successfully managing your communities for over 30 years, and in that time, we've seen pretty much everything.
Well, this condo is haunted. Yeah, this condo is absolutely haunted. It's too much. I don't care what time it is. I'm too scared.
Ah, geez, the toilet's acting up again.
At AMS, we know association management. It's literally in our name. Let us handle the pains, management, financials, and so much more for your association community. Contact us today to get started.
Really? 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 Hi. Yeah.
Homeworks. Installs, repairs, routine improvement. We keep your home working.
And we're back talking with Adam Stites about investment property. So let's take a little bit of a different turn and let's talk about tax advantages, depreciation. How much does that play into, calculating whether you're going to buy a property or how well a property is performing?
Sure. So it's one of many elements that we put into our underwriting spreadsheet, and it factors it in. Obviously, you've how you're allocating between the improvements and the land itself is a factor on that. There's so many myriad of factors that go into calculating that final 5 to 7 year IRR that ultimately we just look at that key metric at the end. as well as the expected generated cash flow at the end of that period in a sale or refinance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Have you, are you using cost segregation studies on any of your properties, or have you done in the past?
Our CPA has started to do that. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
For pushing up the depreciation. Yeah.
Right, and we've had several clients, and then us personally have had cost segregation studies on all of our properties, and even the new ones, because we built some new apartments, and it makes quite an impact. And so, I think that more and more investors are heading in that direction and really reducing the amount of depreciation years.
Sure.
So.
Yep.
But, okay. All right. So if you were giving advice to someone that say is just making their first multifamily purchase, small one, 20 units, what would be the first two things that you would tell them that they absolutely need to do?
Well, I think the first is don't delay. If you have the idea that you want to do this and you've saved the money or you've raised the money, I wish I would have started earlier, and I wish I would have bought more. There over the times that I did look at deals, and I was trying to be maybe a little bit too conservative and conserve cash. But I think get started. Yes, you need to analyze the deal. Yes, you need to be disciplined in your underwriting, the numbers that you look at. But you also can't have paralysis by analysis. At some point, you've got to execute, and you've got to be willing to take a degree of well-calculated risk.
And so have you, about the analysis paralysis, so have you ever analyzed or overthought a deal 101 ways the deal's going to go sideways and just like drove yourself crazy with it?
So I can be, the great thing about my wife is that I can be the 50,000 foot view, everything's daisies and buttercups, and she can be the boom, 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 right down the list. It's like, okay, so it's actually a really great combination, and it's good balance and thought. So I think more of the tendency is, particularly when you've got a 1031 deadline or some other pressing desire or some vacation or who knows what, some other obligations that you have, is to get a deal done. And you start, well, let's start kind of pencil whipping the deal and say, what if we change this and change that? And let's see if we like the numbers better. When in reality, it's you're just fooling yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when you talk about getting started, like if you decide you want to move forward with something and you just want to get, you're giving the advice of, just do it, just get started. So what about financing? So if you're a small investor, you're looking at these 20 units, how do you go out and find financing? If you, let's say you're not doing a 1031, but it's a property you found and you're interested in it. How do you go about finding financing?
Sure. It's been, I use past banks, but assuming this is a new person, it's getting contacted or getting connected with a mentor, maybe someone who's done what you've wanted to do, or maybe reaching out to someone in the industry like yourself, Carmen, who's kind of a connector and who knows of that. We've used financing firms and brokers who have exposed us to a wide variety of different financing. And I will say there's some brokers who will kind of tend to narrow you down to maybe a couple of choices, where there may be other brokers for financing who will give you a much wider array. And to the extent that you're working with a fixed timeline, I really like the direction of going with a loan broker who's going to shop it with a lot of banks. If you have the benefit of time, maybe going direct with a couple of banks, that way you're not having to pay a broker's fee. But you also, if something was to happen, you have enough time on the clock to be able to shift to another bank.
I think some, especially new investors, they've read all different kinds of publications. They've been on Bigger Pockets. I don't know if you've heard of Bigger
Sure, yeah,
Pockets.
absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
They've been on Bigger Pockets. They're trying to assimilate all of this, and perhaps they've made their own due diligence list, or they have their own formulas to calculate some things. And sometimes I think even though they're ready, they just can't make themselves take that one jump. I think what do you think what would you tell somebody when all the stars are aligned, but they just, people, especially if somebody has a family, they got, a couple kids at home and all that, and everybody has to have a down payment, whatever you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what would you tell somebody when they just are not sure that they should actually take that leap, even when the property looks like it is a good opportunity?
Yeah, I don't know. There's the question, like in terms of the makeup of someone who has entrepreneurial traits, and there can be folks who have high IQs or folks who are exceptionally skilled in a given discipline. But I think the third element, which to be an entrepreneur, you need to be willing to take that risk. So absent that third element, it's not to say that it for the right person, maybe it doesn't make sense for them, but they need to have the confidence in their own analysis to be able to take the leap. And it can be scary at times, but it's the kind of the fun thing of what we're doing, that there's a degree of unknown. If there was a certain outcome, everybody would do it, right? Well, everyone would do it. And to be honest, it's even like you're talking about the deals and the financing and the seller wants this, and it's chaotic. And for some people, that could stress them out and not be their thing. For other weird, probably sick people like me, actually get enjoyment from it. Right. So yeah.
Right. Investing in real estate, there is always some risk. It doesn't make any difference how good a deal you got, right? It doesn't make any difference, who your lender is. It doesn't make a difference what the market is. It could be up, down, sideways, whatever. There's always some element of risk, because just as we see in the pandemic, right? Who would have thought there would have been a worldwide pandemic, right? Yeah. And we would have had eviction moratoriums. Yeah. I don't think you factored that in. I know I didn't.
No. Bit of a surprise.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And so, when we're thinking about, about taking those kind of risks, you buy a property and you have a really good, it's a good opportunity. You've done your due diligence, you and Katie, you drilled it down, everything looks good. And if you don't have the right management company, right, it sounds like you did your homework and you have a good one in Tucson. If you don't have the right management company, it can take 90 days, and all your returns can be skewed, right? A bad management company can actually make a really good investment a pretty poor investment in a very short period of time.
Carmen, I could be the poster boy for that. When I first bought Cedar Village, which you managed, later you acquired the company that was my manager at the time. But I was self-managing that property with an on-site, and I thought that was a totally thing to do. Yeah, I've probably done 30 of my own evictions pro se, so yes, I know that all too well, and it is the difference between having a property that's successful, the economies of scale that come from having centralized maintenance, being able to quickly turn a unit. It's just if someone's a serious investor, and they want to be an investor, not somebody who's filing illegal documents or plumbing toilets, or right, it's something you have to do. So not only does the property performance skyrocket, but just your quality of life being an owner versus and I started with single family homes, and you're getting that call and there's an issue with the toilet. Okay, a squirrel went where? Yep. And so we've all been there, but yeah, it's night and day finding the right partner. And I think the more units you get, the more complex the business gets. It's really based on your relationships and the team and the partners that you have working together, as opposed to you individually. Because I'm a terrible plumber.
Well, and being able to talk with your management company too, just like I'm sure you did in Tucson, about what you expect too, because sometimes I think clients don't communicate. Okay, this is the financial expectations of the financial returns, so that the management company can manage to that.
Sure.
So did you talk with your management company down there and see how that might affect them?
Yes, we were very open book and extremely collaborative, and kind of recognizing that this is almost, and it's not an employer-employee relationship. It's just kind of like, okay, you're our new partner, and we know we have to be nice to you, and vice versa. But we want to lay out our vision for the property, taking it from where it is to where it's going. And we'd be absolutely foolish as two people from Portland, Oregon, saying, we know everything, and let me tell you how it's done, and instead to shut up and listen to the management and get their insights, and for it to be collaborative. So a great group down there. Super excited about working and continuing our renovations. Yeah.
Well, they know the market there, right? I mean,
absolutely.
They've been probably doing business there for a long time.
Yeah.
So, do you mind sharing with you what you think's going to happen? People are talking about the V-shaped recovery, the double-shaped recovery, the straight-up recovery. So, what do you think's going to happen?
I think 2021 is going to be a great year. Simply because there's going to be so much pent up demand, and as we have a vaccine, people are going to become more confident in terms of returning to life as normal. I also think that what do they say? It takes 21 days or 30 days to solidify a change in habit. Oh, wow. Have we had a lot of changes in habits that are fundamentally going to change what society looks like? I think 2-bedroom, 1 bath in garden side are going to be a good bet right now. I think we're maybe going to see some reallocation of folks living in urban core to, hey, I can telecommute. Tell me again why I'm dealing with the traffic, the cost of living in a city, maybe some things that I don't like about living in the city. If I can live in an area that's maybe more rural, right? So it's not for everybody, but perhaps a lot of folks who can work from home are going to pick those locations. So the question is for us as property investors, does it make sense to potentially change the criteria, acquisition criteria to include those areas that may benefit from this demographic change?
Right. And I think we're already seeing the exit out of some of the urban areas. The rents are high, places are small, so I think people are, they're going out to the suburban market, finding that they can pay either the same or significantly less in rent, and actually get a bigger place too.
Sure.
So, and I do think housing is going to have to change, just like everything else has changed. And so I think we're going to see more and more, things like that. Landlords adding that to the properties, or perhaps even a design change. I've talked to several architects, and because they do think that there's going to be a lot of people that will be at home. So, how are they going to accommodate that, especially potentially if the kids are still going to be, Zoom schooling at home? How are you going to accomplish that too? So
sure.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you very much for your
Carmen.
insight and your advice and appearing on our show tonight.
Yeah.
And for all you investors out there watching, take a look at that due diligence list and follow some of the advice that Adam gave. So thank you for joining us.